Catherine always looked perfectly in place, never appearing as anything less than the future Queen of the United Kingdom. She and William had grown into their roles as senior royals and continued to show the world what modern royalty could look like. What started as a tense evening with the Emir of Qatar soon changed when Princess Catherine made a small but powerful gesture that altered the entire atmosphere. The great hall of Buckingham Palace glittered with light and sound. Long tables stretched from one end to the other, decorated with golden plates, shining glasses, and polished silver cutlery that reflected the glow of chandeliers above. The scene was grand and elegant, as it always was when the royal family hosted world leaders. But beneath the luxury, there was an uneasiness in the air. The guest of honor that night was Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar. At 45, he had already ruled his country for over a decade. He was known as calm yet firm, a man who wanted respect and made sure Qatar's voice was heard on the world stage. Only days earlier, he had spoken strongly at the United Nations, condemning Israel for its actions in Gaza. His words had echoed across the world, and that same energy seemed to follow him into London. For King Charles, this banquet was about much more than fine food and speeches. Britain and Qatar shared close ties in trade and energy. Qatar's investment fund owned vast parts of London, from iconic shops to towering offices. Keeping the Emir pleased was about more than politeness. It was about trust and partnership between nations. Catherine entered the room with her usual grace, wearing a long ivory gown and a diamond tiara once worn by the late Queen. Since returning to her royal duties earlier that year after completing her cancer treatment, her presence carried even greater meaning. To many, she symbolized hope and quiet strength. At first, the evening flowed smoothly. Guests exchanged polite words, glasses clinked, and gentle music played in the background. But when the meal began, something seemed wrong. The Emir's seat was placed several chairs away from King Charles, near ministers and officials instead. To an outsider, it might have looked like a small detail, but in state visits, seating arrangements were no small matter. The Emir leaned back in his chair, his face tight with displeasure. His aides whispered nervously, their worried expressions showing they knew how serious this could become. Catherine noticed. She had always been quick to sense discomfort in others. At schools, she spotted shy children before teachers did. In hospitals, she recognized anxious parents who tried to hide their fears. That evening, her eyes told her the Emir was not happy. And if nothing changed, the banquet could slip into embarrassment. She waited patiently, never one to act rashly. When the first toast was made and glasses lifted, she turned her gaze toward the Emir. Catching his eyes, she smiled, not the stiff, formal smile of photographs, but one that was warm, kind, and respectful. Then she tilted her head gently and raised her glass directly to him. The gesture was small but powerful. The Emir paused, holding her gaze for a moment before nodding and raising his glass in return. His tense expression softened, and those near him noticed immediately. His aides seemed relieved, sitting a little straighter. The mood began to shift. As the evening went on, Catherine made a quiet effort to engage with him whenever she could. She didn't bring up politics or business but instead asked about his family, showing she cared about what mattered to him personally. The Emir responded, speaking proudly about his children, something he rarely did in public. Soon he was smiling more, even letting out a quiet laugh. The atmosphere around him changed. What had begun as a strained and tense table slowly turned into one filled with easy conversation. British officials felt the difference too. They knew how fragile such moments could be and how quickly they could turn sour if a guest of honor felt overlooked. Yet Catherine, without notes or formal duty, had calmed the room with nothing more than kindness and sensitivity. By dessert, the Emir was leaning forward, engaging with ministers beside him. His earlier frown had vanished, replaced by genuine interest. Praise for the banquet now flowed easily from his table, and his aides looked content. It was clear to everyone that Catherine's quiet actions had saved the evening. Still, she knew her work wasn't finished. State visits were built on subtle gestures, each one carrying meaning far beyond the palace walls. The emir's smile showed improvement, but his earlier displeasure had left a mark. If the night was to truly succeed, she needed to show him not only comfort but deep respect. The speeches began, with King Charles warmly praising the friendship between Britain and Qatar and honoring the ties that bound the two nations together. King Charles gave a warm speech about the strong friendship between Britain and Qatar. He spoke about their cooperation in energy, Qatar's large investments in British schools and hospitals, and the close bond between the two royal families. His words were followed by applause, and he lifted his glass once again in honor of their partnership. When it was the emir's turn to speak, the atmosphere shifted. The room grew quiet as all eyes turned to him. His English was clear, though colored with a strong Qatari accent that gave his words a heavier weight. He began by thanking the king for the warm welcome, but his message soon moved beyond pleasantries. He spoke about fairness in global politics, the urgent need for peace in Gaza, and the responsibility of leaders to protect innocent families caught in conflict. His voice was steady but firm, reminding the guests of his reputation as a man unafraid of speaking hard truths. Some in the room shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Political words in the middle of a glittering state banquet often felt out of place, and not everyone had expected such sharp honesty in a hall decorated with gold and silver. Catherine, however, did not look away. Her gaze stayed fixed on him, her head nodding gently as if to say, "I hear you." It was a simple act, but for a man who valued respect and being listened to, it meant a great deal. When the emir finished, the hall clapped politely, though Catherine could feel the difference. Some were clapping only out of duty. As the applause faded, she leaned slightly toward him and spoke with a warm smile. "Your words remind us all that families, no matter where they live, deserve safety and peace." Her comment was brief but thoughtful. She had not ignored his message or softened it, but instead linked it to something every person in the room could understand. Family. The emir's expression changed. He looked at her with a mix of surprise and appreciation. Catherine's words had touched something personal. His well-known pride as a father. The banquet continued with lighter dishes, and the heavy mood around his speech seemed to ease. Later, when the music paused and smaller conversations formed, Catherine joined a circle around the emir. She guided the discussion away from politics and trade, asking him instead about education in Qatar. She had read about his government's major investments in schools and sports and praised those efforts. "It gives so much hope to young people," she said, "when they see leaders putting schools and health first." The emir leaned in, his tone growing more animated. Education was one of his proudest achievements, and he spoke at length about new projects, scholarships, and the training of young athletes for international competitions. Catherine listened carefully, asking questions that showed she had studied his work. It was clear her interest was real. She was not trying to charm him with shallow words. She had prepared for this. Those nearby noticed the genuine connection forming between them. Catherine was showing him that she valued more than his title. She respected what mattered most to him. The emir's earlier demand for recognition seemed to soften into genuine admiration. He began to speak warmly of the British royal family to his aides, praising Catherine's elegance and her thoughtful approach. Only hours earlier, he had looked ready to retreat into frustration. Now he seemed fully engaged, even pleased. British ministers who had worried about a diplomatic disaster now looked visibly relieved. They whispered among themselves, realizing the princess had managed to do what seasoned diplomats often struggled with. She had earned the emir's respect, not through long arguments, but through empathy and understanding. The banquet continued with music, more toasts, and polite conversations, but the true story of the night was already clear. Catherine had entered a tense situation and, through her warmth and quiet wisdom, turned it into harmony. Still, the most remarkable moment of the evening was yet to come. Her next choice would lift the emir's admiration to an even higher level, leaving everyone in the hall astonished. The mood in the palace was balanced now, though still delicate. The Emir carried the weight of his country's pride with every word and gesture. Catherine knew that one careless moment could undo all she had achieved. Every smile, every pause, every glance mattered. Dinner was served with flawless precision. Silver trays glided across the room, fine china gleamed, and glasses sparkled in the chandelier's glow. Catherine leaned slightly toward the Emir again, making sure he felt her full attention. She brought up his visit to Oxford earlier that week, where he had met Qatari students studying science and medicine. The Emir's expression softened as she spoke. Those students were among his proudest investments, many of them supported by scholarships from his government. Catherine mentioned one student she had read about, a Qatari working on renewable energy, and how it connected with Britain's focus on clean technology. "It is inspiring," she said warmly, "to see young people leading the way." The Emir laughed, a short but genuine laugh, and the tension in his shoulders visibly eased. Her approach was simple but masterful. Highlight what mattered to him, show respect, and build bridges through shared values. King Charles, watching quietly from nearby, did not step in. His look said everything. He trusted his daughter-in-law's calm touch. The Emir, a man known for his strength and pride, now seemed more open than ever. Their conversation soon drifted to one of his favorite subjects: football. After Qatar hosted the FIFA World Cup in 2022, the Emir remained deeply proud of how his country had managed such a historic event. Catherine joined the subject with care, mentioning her children, especially Prince George, and how he had recently started to follow football more closely. She shared lightly that he had been very excited watching England during the Euros. Her voice was gentle and respectful, but also personal. The Emir leaned in with amusement and asked, "And does he support England only?" His question carried a spark of humor. Catherine smiled warmly and replied, "He tries to, but children often choose their heroes from everywhere. He has his favorites." It was a small exchange, but one filled with meaning. By speaking about her children, Catherine revealed something personal and human, something beyond the formality of royal duties. For the Emir, who valued family above all else, this touched him deeply. Across the hall, other guests continued their own conversations, but it was clear where the true center of attention rested: on the unexpected and genuine dialogue between the Princess of Wales and the Amir of Qatar. Later, the Emir steered the conversation back to trade. His earlier frustrations returned, though in a softer way, as he spoke about Qatar's wish for more equal treatment in energy contracts. Catherine listened with quiet focus, nodding when appropriate. She did not argue or attempt to solve the issue directly, as that was beyond her role. Instead, she returned to her strength, shared values. "Your Majesty," she said steadily, her voice calm and clear, "the United Kingdom does not take lightly the strength of its partnerships. It is not only about numbers. It is about the future. We want to build together." The Emir paused, his eyes fixed on her, surprised by the depth of her response. This was not a hollow remark or an empty courtesy. Catherine had shown that his concerns were not being dismissed. She acknowledged them with respect, while carefully avoiding promises she had no authority to give. It was a fine balance, and she held it gracefully. By the time dessert arrived, sweet fruit dishes and delicate tarts, the atmosphere had changed completely. The Emir was no longer the restless guest he had been at the beginning of the night. The tension that once hovered over the table had lifted. Guests nearby felt free to relax, conversation flowed more easily, and the soft notes of a string quartet filled the background. Catherine leaned back slightly in her chair, still poised and elegant. As she glanced across the hall, she saw how far the evening had come. What could have become a humiliating moment for the palace had turned into an evening of subtle but meaningful diplomacy. The Emir's aides, seated nearby, exchanged looks of surprise. They knew his reputation. He was a leader who rarely softened, who insisted on standing his ground. Yet here he was, openly laughing and nodding while in conversation with Catherine. His concerns still existed, but now they were expressed in an atmosphere of respect rather than irritation. The The princess had not only calmed the emir's mood, she had reshaped the atmosphere of the entire banquet. Still, state dinners were long, and pride could resurface at any moment. Catherine knew this well and continued with the same steady rhythm, never letting her focus slip. Then, as the evening drew on, the emir surprised everyone. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on Catherine, and lowered his voice enough to draw the attention of those seated closest. "Britain has always spoken of partnership," he said carefully, his words measured. "But sometimes I feel Qatar is asked to give more than it receives. This is not fair." The table grew still. His words were direct, almost blunt, and they touched on the very subject that had created tension earlier. A few aides shifted uneasily in their seats, uncomfortable with his candor. King Charles remained calm but watchful, allowing Catherine space to respond. She leaned in slightly, her voice steady and composed. "Your Majesty, I hear what you are saying. Respect must work both ways. I believe this evening shows that your voice is valued here." The emir studied her face carefully. He was not used to hearing such direct but respectful honesty from a royal figure. Most would have dodged his words with vague responses, but Catherine had faced them head-on. She had acknowledged his grievance without offering excuses, and that caught his attention. Noticing the silence that lingered at the table, Catherine went a step further. She reminded him of Britain's deep ties with Qatar, not just through contracts or investments, but through human connections. She spoke of Qatari families who had made London their second home, of students studying in British schools, and of doctors training in British hospitals. "That is more than business," she said softly. "That is trust." The emir's expression shifted once more. His face softened, and he leaned forward with a gentler tone. "You speak with honesty, Princess. That is rare." The tension that had risen again dissolved around the table. Guests nearby eased into conversation once more, quietly relieved. Catherine had not dodged the subject, nor had she fueled it. She had addressed it with dignity and respect. The discussion then moved naturally to lighter ground. Catherine asked about the emir's plans to expand Qatar's cultural influence through art and museums. His eyes brightened as he spoke of his vision for Doha as a global cultural hub. Catherine listened attentively, sharing her own experiences of visiting art galleries with her children, linking her family life naturally to his ambitions. The emir chuckled, his tone warmer than before. "You remind me that leaders are also parents," he said. As the evening went on, something changed in the air. What had started as tension slowly softened into warmth. People seated nearby began to smile at one another, and laughter broke through from time to time. The Amir of Qatar, who had entered the palace with a sharp and demanding tone, now began speaking with respect and even praise. When it came time for speeches, King Charles rose first. In his usual thoughtful style, he spoke about friendship between nations and the importance of respect. His words were calm and steady, setting a dignified tone. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The Emir was invited to speak. At the start of the evening, many had worried about what he might say. But now his voice carried a different note. He did not speak about unfair treatment or make strong demands. Instead, he spoke about respect, about the history and hospitality of Britain, and about how warmly he had been welcomed that night. To everyone's surprise, he even turned toward Catherine and thanked her directly for her kindness during their exchange.